listening to Big World at Work.
Kai's Inquisition, The Blight of Shadowfall. Episode 3. Written and read by Tawn Krakowski. As the ocean wanderer sailed out of the harbor, Kai was back on the topmost deck surveying the activity with interest. Sailors scurried to let out sails, trim them to the right angle, tie off lines, and obey all of Captain Rydal's gruff commands as relayed by his first mate. She leaned back with her elbows resting atop the side rail and allowed herself to reflect upon the hermit's words as the crew deftly maneuvered the ship into the rolling sea. With only an hour or so to go before sunset, Kai resigned herself to meandering below to check on her personal items before making her way to the galley for dinner. She walked at a leisurely pace, as she had overheard a few of the crew complaining about the tasteless, watery broth that seemed to be the cook's only fare. She was not looking forward to discovering the truth of it. Her berth was a space perhaps 5 paces square within a cargo hold, a deck below the gun deck that had been sectioned off with canvas to accommodate passengers. Lorst had shown her another collection of enclosures exactly like it across the cramped hallway where Chajek had chosen to bunk, but Pia and Jack had talked her into staying near their own spots. Kai couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting was more than chance and was therefore easily swayed. Sweeping aside the rough fabric, Kai found her weapons and the small trunk containing her other items untouched, as expected. With a sigh, she retrieved the pitcher she found on the floor and poured fresh water into a shallow wooden bowl resting on the shelf loosely affixed to the wall. At an unhurried pace, she washed for dinner. During the meal, which was nothing short of unfortunate, Kai was pleasant but aloof with most of the other diners, choosing to observe rather than engage. Chajek turned out to be a bard with some measure of talent. He entertained the passengers and off-duty crew with light-hearted jokes, bawdy shanties, and skillful feats of juggling, but Kai was tired and decided not to stay for his entire performance. Not long after she had first entered the galley, Kai left with her stew unfinished and her stomach complaining, to meditate in the relative peace of her hammock. Kai spent much of the next few days learning all she could of the crew and passengers, through both direct questioning and by keeping an ear out for the gossip that inevitably spreads like wildfire on a sailing vessel. As her fondness for Pia and Jack grew, Kai's esteem for Chajek waned, and she began to actively avoid him. The flamboyant halfling, he was more than happy to discuss his origins along with anything and everything else for hours on end, seemed genuine, but his aggressive conversation style and thinly veiled sarcasm grated on all of their nerves. Kai had also caught him eavesdropping on more than one occasion, and resolved to guard her tongue more carefully in the future. "What do you think of Chajek?" Pia asked one evening at dinner while they watched the little man perform. "It's only been a few days, and it seems like that little bug is always underfoot. I'll squash him if he's not more careful with his spying. Accidentally, of course." "I believe that penance would be just," Kai grinned. Jack's chuckle was low and cold. The following day the ship made a scheduled stop in Port Defiance. Kai observed a tough-looking, attractive woman with obvious elven traits strut aboard. She gave her name as Brivis Itadra, and her athletic figure immediately drew the unwanted, leering attention of one of the Ocean Wanderer's crewmen, a dark, stocky man who everyone called Stone Skull. "My bunk's available if you don't mind sharing, wench," he offered, salaciously licking his upper lip at her. "I'll even let ye polish me sword." Stone Skull's crude comment did not surprise Kai, as she had been on the receiving end of similar invitations, but Brivis's reaction did. Her face drained of color. She clenched her hands into fists and howled an incensed battle cry before launching herself at the man. She had managed to bowl him over and rake her nails across his face before Lorst hauled her off of him, while she hissed and spit like a wet were-tiger. Stoneskull was sent to the brig by way of the infirmary, and Brivis was welcomed aboard with a sincere apology from the captain. Kai made a mental note to keep an eye on Brivis Itaudra. A few days following the altercation between Brivis and her vulgar would-be suitor, Kai stood at the starboard railing, dreamily observing a distant squall. The fury of the wind and the way the surf surged higher to touch the low, swooping gray clouds reminded Kai of her goddess. "No need to worry about that little storm. This is as close as we will get to it," Lorst commented as he joined her. "I'm not worried," Kai said softly. "It reminds me of—" An unusual noise from below decks met her ears, which were much more acute than the first mate's human senses. "Of what?" he asked, the confusion plain on his face. "I heard a crash. Something is wrong below. A fight. Get the captain," Kai hissed, already moving toward the stairs. It was probably none of her business, most likely a dispute among the crew, but she had never been adept at keeping out of the affairs of others. It was one of the reasons she was chosen to be an Inquisitor in the first place, her overwhelming curiosity and insatiable need to find the crux of every situation. "Did you hear that?" Pia whispered loudly as Kai passed. She and Jack, who had been having a muted conversation near the main mast, fell into step behind Kai. "Yes," Kai said curtly. "Let's go see what's going on." The three women hurried down the stairs and were confronted by the oddest fight they had ever witnessed. Chajek, his normally meticulous attire torn and askew, ran screeching toward them as fast as his tiny legs could carry him, chasing what appeared to be another slightly shorter and freely bleeding halfling. "Catch him! He's a thief! A stowaway!" Chajek panted, his voice cracking with effort. Stunned, Kai, Pia, and Jack allowed the injured halfling to pass without reacting. Pia recovered first and grabbed Chajek by the scruff as he tried to continue the pursuit up the stairs. "What's going on?" she shouted. "Let me go!" Chajek wailed. "Why did you let him get away? You know me, and yet you stop me instead of some unkempt pickpocket you've never seen before? Let me go!" He kicked furiously at Pia until she dropped him unceremoniously at her feet. More nimbly than Kai thought possible, Chajek jumped up and bounded up the stairs in a frenzy. The three women followed the raving creature up the stairs, unsure what else to do. Topside, the thief had found some measure of safety by climbing atop Lorst, out of the enraged minstrel's reach. His victory was short-lived, however, once Captain Rydal discovered he had picked up a stowaway. "Put him in the brig with Stoneskull," the captain angrily barked at his first mate. "The dock can tend to his wounds there. I also want a full accounting of the ship's cargo within the hour. Dismissed. Chajek, come with me." The captain returned to the wheel in the stern of the ship with a very unhappy Bard in tow. Kai could see relief wash across the stowaway's face at the prospect of being safe in the Ocean Wanderer's brig rather than brusquely thrown overboard. She pursed her lips and narrowed her eyes in thought. This outlaw may have valuable information. Perhaps he'd be willing to trade if Kai offered to negotiate a more lenient sentence with the local authorities once they reached Adelam. She peeled the struggling rogue off Lorst's back and suggested, "Let me help. We can continue our conversation along the way if you'd like. Naderu knows I could use some amusement." "That's fine with me," Lorst agreed impulsively as he rearranged his clothing. Kai tucked the thief under her arm like a sack of laundry and winked at a dumbstruck Pia. "Save a seat at dinner for me?" she said coyly before descending down the stairs after Lorst.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
listening to Big World Network.